All right, let's try this. Let me go post this over here. This is a weird situation. This is a weird situation all the way around. It looks good. It looks good. Very weird moment. Very weird moment in this country. I don't know, where things just happen. Nick's coming back. I get a chance to hang out with Nick for the Muckrake podcast tomorrow. I'm very excited about that. The Muckrake podcast on Tuesday is going to have Nick Houseman back, which is good because I have literally no idea what I'm doing when it comes to technology. No idea. None. I've had to rely on Nick as he's been on vacation because I have just absolutely screwed up the technology. I mean, it's intense how badly I've screwed up the technology. All right, here we are. Take two. Let's do it. Good thing is, got a decent bottle of bourbon to finish up. I've got a lot of questions. Oh, man. It is frustrating just to try and do a live stream on a Sunday night. Anyway, so I think we've seen I think we've seen with Meadows. I think we've seen with Trump. I've seen with all of them. I think we've seen they have no interest in getting the pandemic under control. Like their entire idea at this point is just to hope that it normalizes in America, which I think that we have seen. I think at this point that we've watched that take place. People just becoming, desensitized to it and normalized to it, and it's not going to be a problem anymore. And as long as they have the sports, and as long as they have the restaurants, and as long as they have their normal lives, I don't think it really matters. And that's one of the reasons why we really, really, really need to vote Donald Trump out in a big way and not let him steal power, because it's already killed hundreds of thousands and so many unnecessary deaths and so much unnecessary suffering. And it's just going to get worse. It really is. It's just going to get worse unless we get this thing under control. Anyway, all right. Well, I'm going to get to questions tonight because I don't want to mess around with this feed too much, because I would love it if there's a stimulus package by December, but I don't see it happening. I really don't. I don't think I think Congress has been completely perverted to the point where they don't do anything to help constituents. That's one of the biggest problems with all of it. I don't know. So we got a bunch of questions. We're going to do this thing, and hopefully we can get through, knock on wood, without any sort of major giant problems. All right. Travis says, if Biden wins, should we expect a widespread violent white nationalist insurgency full of Oklahoma City-style bombings or mass shootings? And if so, how do we prepare for that? I don't think it's necessarily going to happen immediately, but I keep saying I don't think that the extreme right is simply going to go away. They've created an infrastructure, they have recruited, they have radicalized so many more people. And, they understand that power is within their grasp. They understand that demographics are changing to the point where they might not ever be able to have a white supremacist aristocratic rule again if they're not going to be careful. I think there's a real possibility that if Joe Biden is elected and actually takes office, I think that we could be looking at a lot of domestic terrorism, white extremists. I think that's a real possibility. I think it's something that we need to be aware of. And again, just to go ahead and start this this Sunday night thing off on the right note, that we need to remember, electing Joe Biden is not the end of this thing. It's just the beginning of a much, much larger fight that has to be fought. So yeah, I think that's right. I think that there needs to be a dedicated task force to this thing. I think that they have to take it seriously. You can't just take power in a Biden administration and then just, be like, well, white supremacy is over, white terrorism is over, we're fine. They have to move on it. They have to move on it because if they don't, these people, it's not like they're going to, it's not like they're going to be fine with this. They do feel emboldened. And we're going to see another situation. It's like the Clinton situation and during the Obama administration. I mean, we had a huge number of white terrorists who were trying to overthrow the government during the Obama administration, because they were offended by the idea of a black man being president. So I think that I think that is a real possibility happening for sure. Maud says, "Do you have any insight into how dangerous the intersection of white supremacism and Q nuts?" I have not heard them called Q nuts. That's new. And transnational authoritarian mafia type rule, Russia, Egypt, Turkey is going to get in the near future. All right, so let's be honest about this. It's already pretty extensive. White terrorists in this country are in communication and coordination with neo Nazis and neo fascists around the world. They have been for years. It's one of the great hidden truths of what's going on in this current moment. So they are communicating, they are coordinating. That's one of the more frightening things. I think people need to understand that is that there is a neo-fascistic movement in the world right now that are they're coordinated and they're taking over governments. They are taking over societies. They are troubling societies, engaging in terrorist operations, and it happens all around the world right now. And just because we don't talk about it, which by the way, we don't talk about it in part because it's really disturbing, but also because we have to start talking about white supremacy. But the fact that we don't talk about it lets them hide in the shadows and lets them gain power. It's really, really problematic. Ricker, what are your thoughts on Putin's announcement earlier today? So, for those who haven't heard, the thing that was happening today is that Vladimir Putin came out and said that he doesn't think that Joe Biden's son did anything wrong in Ukraine and that there's not really a scandal with Joe Biden. Let's have a little bit of a talk. Let's talk about how these things work and some of the problems in our political environment right now. A lot of people took this as a celebration. They were like, look, Vladimir Putin turned his back on Donald Trump. He didn't turn his back on Donald Trump. There's a couple of things happening. One, it's supposed to make it look like Donald Trump opposes Vladimir Putin and Vladimir Putin opposes Donald Trump. It's probably to give him a campaign boost. On top of that, why would you celebrate anything that Vladimir Putin would say was totally on the up and up in any part of the world? I mean, he is a problematic dictator. Stop celebrating or taking anything that he says to mean good faith or anything like that. It's not like he is actually trying to hurt Donald Trump. He didn't throw Trump under the bus. He did it to meddle in the United States election. So we have to stop doing this rah rah our team thing where if something happens and it just so happens to help us, we think that everything is fine. That's not the truth. There are people who are meddling and screwing with all of this stuff. So if Vladimir Putin says anything, listen to what he says, think about it for a second, and then throw it out. I mean, the man is a despot. Stop celebrating something he does or thinking that there's some sort of strategy in here that could possibly help anyone. We have to move away from this game theory, trench warfare mindset. Absolutely. He's a manipulator. He's a KGB agent. Of course he's messing around and meddling in American politics and elections. Of course he is. Like, don't listen to what he says. Don't celebrate what he says. My God. We got to move away from that shit. Holy God. By the way, notice this feed isn't screwed with? Fascinating. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. Like I was saying, got invited onto Russia TV for a couple times, like 3 or 4 invites. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? I don't know. I'll tell you where my autumnal plaid flannel is. It's in the closet because it's like 80 degrees out here in late October. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. Luckily, the weather is going to drop. My hope My hope is that next Sunday when we do the bourbon talk, the pre-election bourbon talk, my hope is that I'll have the autumnal flannel going. That is the hope. Well, good. I toast anybody who can wear a flannel tonight. Good for you. Wells, me too. I'm disappointed as well. I would much rather be in a flannel. Okay, so we have a couple of questions that kind of go together, so I'm going to read both of them. Wobbly said, so when I talk to people about how bad things could get, I always get this. US has been through a lot. We'll be fine. Are we overreacting? Why don't people see what Trumpism is or what it means to US if he wins? Great interview on Friday. I thought so too. I thought the Kinzier talk was really good. I was really, really happy to hang out with Sarah. She's awesome. Sam, some people just don't get it. Why? Well, there's a lot of different reasons why people don't get it or why people aren't tuned in on this thing. There's a lot of different variants, and I'll talk about them very quickly. One is that they're in on it. They have a political or a financial incentive to believe that everything is fine in America and everything will totally work out. There are reasons to believe that. Part of it is that you have reached the higher echelon of influence, power, and wealth. And if you are at the upper echelon of influence, power, and wealth, well, why would you want to trouble the meritocracy? That would put you in danger, right? That would mean that there's a possibility that your place at the top of the heap could be put in danger. Well, other people have been so influenced by the mythology of American exceptionalism, they don't think there's any possibility that anything could ever happen bad to America. That, yeah, maybe we're being troubled by Trump, but we'll really come out on the other side. And that's one of the bigger problems, is that there are a lot of people who should be fighting this thing tooth and nail, who believe in the mythology of American exceptionalism. And when they believe in the mythology of American exceptionalism, they think it'll just solve itself. They think it'll just figure itself out because that's America and that's who America is. And so these people really don't believe that something is wrong. Of course, there are the other people, Trump supporters. And I saw this thing earlier. I forget who it was who tweeted it. I think I like quote tweeted it and said something about it. This guy was like, well, don't Trump supporters know that he's lying? Like, it's obvious that he's lying. It's like, absolutely, they know he's lying. You have to understand that a lot of people understand that Donald Trump is an absolute liar and he's incompetent. But what he's doing is beneficial to them. They know that he's lying, but they also understand that if he's allowed to lie and if those lies take hold, well, then they can maintain their power or they can increase their power. One of the things, and I hope that maybe American Rule has helped with this, and I hope maybe the American Rule lectures and maybe the Muckrake podcast have helped with this. But one of the great secrets of politics is that it's all about stories. It's all about convincing enough people that your chosen story, your chosen narrative, your chosen mythology is either real or beneficial. Not everybody is in this for the right reasons. A lot of people are in this for power and wealth and influence. And so they're more than happy to let someone lie. They're more than happy to let other people die. And that's where they are. Lori, I think that Trump has both mishandled COVID intentionally, but also has mishandled it unintentionally. I think on one hand, like, he's been more than happy to let people in blue states die. I mean, we've had enough quotes there. Oh, Elizabeth, I got a question. I got an answer for that. I'll get to that right after this. Yeah, I think Trump was more than happy to let people in blue states die. The conversations and quotes have shown that that's not our people. He was more than happy to hurt blue states, so it would possibly hurt either Democratic governors or Democratic senators. I mean, I was calling it genocide very earlier on. I mean, I think that's really what was happening. But I also think that they're also incompetent. I mean, they're both malevolent, but also incompetent. So there's a lot of this stuff that they simply just couldn't do. And on top of that, the market doesn't want anybody to actually mess around with coronavirus. One of the things, and again, this is disturbing, but it doesn't make it less true, is that a lot of people see the pandemic as a market correction. It's going to allow them to fire a lot of people. It's going to allow them to lower wages, lower benefits, and all in an effort because, we're in unprecedented times. So, businesses don't want a government actually messing around with the economy. The moment that they tried to help us with an economic crisis, whether or not it's a stimulus payment or, helping us with our rent, the whole illusion starts to tumble. So, yeah, it's a combination of malevolence and incompetence, and it's a really huge thing. Elizabeth says, why do so many poor people who've been struggling forever support him? I have to tell you, I have a lot of family members who support him who've been struggling financially for a very long time. They're the type of people who would have seen Trump coming, a mile away, and they would have just understood that he was full of bullshit and he was a wealthy person looking to manipulate them. The problem is that they do not feel like any politicians have had their back for a very long time. And a big reason for that is because the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have both sort of moved beyond them. On top of that, the media doesn't pay any attention to them. It doesn't look at how middle America is falling apart. Finally, somebody at least paid a little bit of lip service to them, and they believed in it. Not to mention that they have a lot of racist, fascistic, and misogynistic tendencies. It's not great, and I think a lot of them don't understand that they're being screwed over by Trump, who, by the way, has only helped the wealthy and the powerful. But they see it as a win. They see it as a way to, flip the middle finger to people and hopefully score a couple of cultural wins. It's the same thing where, people who don't have a lot, they're celebrating their football team winning a game. Even if the football team is losing all the time, if the football team wins a game, it's a big giant win for them, right? They invest themselves in these movements and these ideas, and it feels like they're winning by proxy. Yeah. Sebastian, what is the neo-fascist movement called? It doesn't have a name. It's just sort of this loose conglomeration of people. They all have different names. I mean, it's the Base, it's Atomwaffen, it's Golden Dawn, which finally is starting to, get scrutinized. Yeah, D West, real fast. I do want to talk about the Borat Giuliani movement moment. I think, and I can't remember. Maybe it was on. By the way, we if you're a patron of the Muckrake Podcast over at patreon.com/Muckrake Podcast, we opened up a Discord. So I think I posted this over there, possibly. I think that the Giuliani thing in the Borat movie showed what happens at this certain level. It's the Trump, when you're a star, they let you do it idea, which is like, I assume that every time they go into one of these situations, they just assume that some sort of subservient woman is going to, I don't know, kowtow to their whims, sexual, power-wise, politics-wise. I think that's what happened with Giuliani. I mean, it was obvious that he was so, he was just so comfortable just taking liberties with her, the way he was touching her, the way that he moved from one room to another, the way that he talked to her. I think they just believe that they deserve it. I think that that's what that showed. Charlotte says, I'm so concerned that Trump will declare himself the winner on election night no matter what, and his cult will full on believe he is still the president of the United States, even if Biden wins. We will have a situation where the country has two presidents of the United States. Do I think that's totally insane? No. No, I don't think that's nuts. I think there's a real possibility that for a couple of months we might have basically, kind of shadow presidents of the United States. I would make an argument or a guess, yeah, like a pope and an anti-pope, which, by the way, I didn't know about this until I started researching the new book. That's exactly right. There were people who had claims on the papacy that, like, they would go off and they would be the pope in like another part of the world, and they would have arguments and they would have devotees and all that stuff. I think, so like, let's say that Trump accepts defeat. Let's say that happens. I think almost immediately he is on a, OANN. I don't think Fox News is where it's going to happen, because Fox News isn't far enough right for these people. I wrote a thread about this a while back, but it's moving past Fox News. It's becoming something else. So I wouldn't be shocked if, and by the way, I hope somebody remembers this, because if it happens, I want credit for this. If this happens, I want credit for this. There's a real possibility that either on OANN or a Trump TV or something along those lines, they will build a mock Oval Office where he will go in and once a night or all the time, he'll just hang out in this mock Oval Office and make decrees as like the president in exile, or the Hollywood president, whatever you want to believe, or reality show, or of a nightly show where he sits in this mock Oval Office and just yells things. I would not be shocked by that. I would not be shocked by that, because it actually is the perfect. It would be the perfect situation for Trump, who wants all of the pomp and circumstance and the respect of being president of the United States. He's not interested in the actual responsibility of being president of the United States, the consequences of doing the right thing or the wrong thing. It would be perfect for him. I could see that happening. I could absolutely see that happening. And what's more, there are going to be Trump cultists who see him as the rightful president. That's just going to happen. There are going to be people who see Joe Biden as someone who carried out a coup, and Donald Trump and the Republican Party will do everything in their power to push that idea. I think that is a very real possibility, and that's if Trump obviously accepts defeat, which is it's a big if. Cynthia, what's your sober, no pun intended, hey, read of how strong the pro-Trump goons are right now, and what are they capable of? I think we're going to see intimidation and violence at the polls in November. I think that is that's almost inevitable at this point, and that's terrible. But I do. I think we're going to see violence at the polls, intimidation at the polls. There's a possibility if Trump carries out litigation, or if he protests the election. I mean, we'll have violence in the street. Yeah. Where is Bill Barr? By the way, where is Bill Barr? I would love that question answered by somebody. What in the living hell is he up to? He's one of those people you have to keep your eye on. Where is he? No. Arden says, for those of us who are not American, what do we need to look out for on election night? Okay. So, and by the way, this is a primer for people who are going to be, watching this anyway. The question is this: will the networks realize their responsibility and treat this soberly? I have to tell you that everything that I've seen from them tells me that will not be the case, because it's not who they are and it's not what their profit is dependent on. So I would say that the networks are probably going to be competing to see who can call the election the fastest. Well, the question is whether or not Trump will beat them to it. He could just declare victory based on internal polls, or what he's been seeing, or what he feels, or quote unquote what people are talking about. Well, what's that going to look like? I would say by 11:30 on election night, we will have a decent idea of what the next couple of days are going to look like. I don't think that we're going to necessarily have a result unless it is a tsunami-like landslide type victory. But even then, I don't think we're going to know. I really, really don't. But I think we'll have a decent idea on election night how Donald Trump is going to be reacting about it. Is he going to lose his mind? Is he going to call conspiracies? Is he going to undermine the electorate? Are they going to turn on this anti-democratic machine that they've created? Or is it going to turn into a sour grapes? Well, I didn't want to be president anyway. Everybody can screw off and pound sand. That's what to look for on election night, because it's going to be obvious pretty quickly, I think, where we're going. I don't think that we're necessarily going to know who won on election night, but I keep telling everyone. And by the way, if you want to become a patron of the Muckrake Podcast, we're going to be watching the results together as a group. So that's exclusive to patrons. So if you want to go over to patreon.com/Muckrake Podcast, it might be a rough night. Who knows? But it might be better together. And on top of that, I'm going to be watching to understand if I need to be in the streets. I don't know. I agree. I don't think that Trump is fighting this hard to shrug and walk away either. I unfortunately, the story in our media has become that Joe Biden is so far ahead that it's going to be totally fine and don't worry about it and democracy will be saved. But I don't believe that either. I don't think he's simply going to do that. I don't. I agree. Buy food, full tank of gas, and cash. Emma Baker, or Emma LZ Baker, I believe. What is an effective way to protest a potential soft coup? Standing around public buildings as an easy target of right wing violence, an easy group for politicians to ignore, seems like it will be ineffective. I understand where you're coming from on that, Baker. Like, I totally get that. I would say this. I understand that not everybody feels comfortable being out and protesting. If there's a coup in this country, we cannot afford to not have our voices heard. That is where we have to be. That's where we have to be. I really truly believe if you can get out there, if you are safe, if you're not putting yourself in danger, and I understand that there's a certain amount of danger, but we 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 can't let something like this take place. We can't, because when it's gone, and there is not a whole lot of coming back. I keep saying when people like this get in power, it's almost impossible getting them out. And this is one of those situations where if they try some sort of a soft coup or any kind of movement, yeah, yeah, you can't let that happen. Franklin Lake Girl, thanks for your talks. Hey, thanks for watching. Best case scenario, let's say either Florida or Texas goes blue on election night and is declared for Biden. What crazy claim of cheating or election rigging do you see Trump could call at that point if he would be the clear loser? What's his plan? Um, this isn't very exciting. Oh, a soft coup is like a situation where, like, whether it's through political means or litigation, um, as opposed to troops in the street, tanks in the street, people being murdered. That's a hard coup. Soft coup, the easier parts, or the softer parts, I guess you would say. Oh yeah, the Supreme Court could hand Trump the election. Absolutely, that's a possibility. Um, You know, I think first of all, I don't know that if Texas is going to go blue. I think this oil thing is actually playing in Texas, but I could be wrong. I think there's a possibility that Georgia could go blue, and I can tell you that all of the internal polls, both with Biden and also with Trump, they show like a they show that Trump doesn't have much of a path to victory. Um, yeah, I but that's the thing about Georgia. Georgia would have a Democratic female black governor right now if the election wasn't stolen from her. I mean, Georgia's been ready to go blue for a few years now. I think there's a possibility Georgia could go for him. But here's the thing with Trump, and I've said this before. When Trump lost by 3 million votes in 2016, how many votes were fraudulent in Trump's mind? 3 million. That's that's the mindset. Like whatever he loses by will automatically be false votes, and they'll go with it. The electoral college could be messed around. I don't know. I at this they already talked about the possibility of messing around with electors. I don't know how far that plan went, or if they were just trying to figure it out. I don't know if that was, like trying to give Santa Claus actors $250 million. The record part of voting turnout so far, it makes me hopeful. But I will also say that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and there's a possibility that with the postal office scare, people are just getting their votes in early because they're voting by mail. So I don't, I, I'm not treating that like money in the bank just yet. Labotting says, "Do you think Biden and Harris understand the extent of the threat to democracy? Are they prepared to make necessary changes, reverse the course if they have both chambers?" I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know if they understand the threat. Biden has had moments. I think earlier in his candidacy, and it was, oh, absolutely, the electors can mess around with the election results. They've always just been held by their honor. They can absolutely mess with the electoral results. I think that there have been moments with Joe Biden where he has talked about this thing where it was obvious he didn't understand it. And I will tell you that I think in the debates, he underplayed the threat of Donald Trump. I think he talked about the dangers of the pandemic and so on and so forth, but I don't think that he talked about how dangerous this thing is. He has said on multiple occasions that if he gets elected, he thinks that Republicans will come around and work with him. I don't buy that, and that's a problem. That's a real problem. Harris, I've heard her say some things that made it sound like she understood it, but the question is, Oh, I'll answer that, JJ American. I'll answer that because I think that's a good question and it's an easy question on top of that. So I don't know. I don't know that they understand it, but I don't think that the Democratic Party has shown an understanding of exactly what we're dealing with. I think the Democratic Party has failed to portray this in the actual light and the actual crisis that it is. And that's a problem. And I think, particularly leading up to this election, that's a problem. They've messed it up for 4 years, and they messed it up again in this campaign. I think that they should have talked about this as an existential political social crisis, and they didn't do that. And they left a lot of us out in the lurch. And unfortunately, they made it sound like a lot of this was hyperbolic, wild exaggeration, which it's not. JJ American says, "What are your thoughts on the bipartisan commission Biden proposed on the Supreme Court?" It's politics. He didn't want to say, yeah, I'll pack the courts. He didn't want to say that. He just wanted to make it sound like it would be bipartisan. I'm not going to run across this like a totalitarian maniac. It was a half answer. Is what it was. Peace on Earth. What do you make of Q hijacking the Save the Children movement and some survivors promoting it? The Q movement has figured out the way to get around not just social media censoring, but the way to bring people in and radicalize them before they understand that they're being radicalized by QAnon. It's an incredibly dangerous thing. And now you're seeing the Republican Party start to embrace it, which we're going to talk about a little bit more here in a minute. But yeah, this is how it spreads. And this is also how religions and cults spread. It's that idea. They find a way that sounds pretty good. It doesn't sound controversial. It doesn't sound radical. It doesn't sound crazy. And then once you're in and once you're invested and a big part of yourself is involved in it, they drop the hammer and all of a sudden you're talking about JFK Jr. showing up at a rally. Seamus says, what are 3 things you're concerned about Trump will do from November 3rd to January 20th to hamstring the country? I have to tell you that there is a long history in this country of presidents on their way out undermining the president on the way in. I'm not sitting in a room full of vengeful lawyers, partisan lawyers. I think that's a possibility that he won't sign the budget. I think that's a real possibility. I think there's a possibility that maybe if Trump thinks something is going to go through in terms of like court packing, that he's going to try and do the other thing all the way around. I have no idea what he is capable of, but I will tell you that I think there is a very real, distinct possibility that Trump is going to tie the country up in litigation. I would not be shocked about that. John says, I got American Rule and read it in 3 days. That's quick. That's quick. And I bought copies for my family and friends. Hey, cheers. I appreciate that. Not a bad Christmas gift. If we're going to get a new president, we have to start talking about how to make this country better. Let's understand how we got to where it's going. Did the experience of writing American Rule make you less or more hopeful about the future? It actually made me more hopeful. Weirdly enough, I have to tell you that once I started to understand how this country had worked and the lies we'd been told and how we'd been manipulated, it made me feel like this whole thing wasn't that inexplicable, that we could start to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like it got to the point where, um, you know, once I understood how the levers worked, it made me realize that in the past we've seen it work. We've seen Americans realize they have power and they have agency and they change the world. And that's an amazing thing. So it made me really hopeful, which is strange. I did not expect this book to make me hopeful, particularly as I was figuring out how power worked. I thought it would totally depress me and bum me out, made me feel better, made me understand how it goes and how we can work against it. So writing American Rule made me actually more hopeful. I understand it's a hard book. I understand that looking at the history of America and realizing that you've been lied to by teachers and elders and people in your family and popular culture, I understand that that's disturbing and hard. But once you start to understand the real truth of things, I think the bigger picture becomes more obvious and suddenly you're not lost anymore. It took me a little over a year to write American Rule. I had to relearn the entire history of America. And listen, you know what? It's my own show, so I'll talk about it. It's totally fine. Because I needed to get this book out before before the election, because one of the things that myself and my editors wanted was we wanted to be able to get American Rule out before the election, so hopefully enough people could read it and understand how Trump came about. I had to like expedite it, and so I had to write it in a little bit over a year. And I have to tell you, it wore me out. I mean, the gray in my hair and my beard is right in that book, and it was it was getting up at like 5:30 and 6 a.m. a lot of days to do a lot of work. That book wore me out, but I'm really, really happy it worked. Howard Zinn was a huge influence. I read Howard Zinn in 2003. That was my big awakening. I don't know if anybody else or it was for you as well, but it was as we were getting ready to go into Iraq, I realized that things were really, really bad and that something was wrong. And Howard Zinn made a big difference for me, along with like bell hooks, um, Chomsky, all those that made the big difference. Juxtaposed, do you know why Jefferson just once took that anti-slavery stance in the pre-Declaration of Independence document? Um, so I write about this in American Rule that the original Declaration of Independence included a passage that condemned slavery, and possibly would have led to the condemnation of slavery. I think Jefferson, when he was writing the Declaration of Independence, I think he was looking to his Nancy, Anti-Intellectual in American Life by Hofstadter. That's a great book. That's well worth reading for sure. There's another one that just popped out of my head, but um, pseudo events. I'll remember it in a second. That's a hell of a book too. I'll remember that in a second. But I think when Jefferson was writing the Declaration of Independence, I think that I think he was trying to reach for something higher than himself, the idealized self. And I think that that was when he was trying. United States of Paranoia is a great book. That's a great, great book. I think that Jefferson was trying to reach a certain level that he had never reached before, this idealized self, like beyond slavery. And he had talked about like releasing his slaves. He never got there and he never did it, which is a huge mark against him. And what a problematic person he is, and what a hypocrite he was as president of the United States as well. But it was rejected by Congress because they knew that they had to keep the southern states in line. Which, by the way, the new American Rule lecture number 3, which I hope is up either tomorrow or maybe Wednesday, is all about the Confederacy and Trumpism as a revival of the Confederacy, which includes this whole idea of what we're talking about right now. So check it out if you haven't. Redwood Lake Girl, given our complete lack of history in holding former presidents accountable, do you see any path forward to us to do so this time? No, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I don't. I've talked about this on past live streams. Presidents don't prosecute former presidents because they don't want to be prosecuted. The terrible truth about the American presidency is the moment that you take that oath of office, you are going to do some really terrible things, and you don't ever want to be prosecuted for it. I mean, you kill a lot of innocent people, you exploit a lot of different people, and none of them want to set the precedent for doing that. And that's one of the reasons why Joe Biden will probably not prosecute Donald Trump. I know that's terrible, and I hate to throw water on the fire here, but there's a real possibility that attorney generals will. The American Rule lectures are on YouTube. It's on this same channel. So there are 2 so far. There's the first one, which is all about Trumpism as fascism. The second one is about how the founding of the country was a white aristocratic founding. Disgruntled Pelican. Let's see where we're at. Okay. There's been a lot of speculation about election night shenanigans, but what do you think is the possibility for an inauguration night coup if Biden wins? I had never considered the possibility of an election night coup, but I have to tell you that undoubtedly, if Biden wins and if he is going to actually take over the presidency, I guarantee you there's a white terrorist cell out there that will plan some sort of election night coup. Whether or not they're broken up, whether or not they try something, that's a different thing altogether. I think the real danger is between November and January. I think that's when we're in a lot of trouble. And I think we're getting ready to move up to a point where we're in a lot of trouble. Selt says, besides voting, what other recourse do we have to present an encore from the right? They will not go quietly. We have to do the work that they did. We have to do what they did. They have been working at every level of government in a way that the left has not. They have been involved in every local race. They've been involved in every regional race, every state race. They've been, taking care of the legislatures, the judicial branches of all these places. They've been doing the hard work for power that the left has not. One of the big problems, and I'll answer your question in a second, Panther Hawk. One of the big problems is that the left is really, really interested in symbolic victories. The left is very interested, and one of the reasons is because there aren't many victories on the left. So most of the victories that the left celebrates are symbolic victories, being on the right side of history, narrowly losing, right? There's a reason why, it's like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her most influential thing that she, really has been saddled with is not just like her work, obviously, for feminism, but her dissents. So the left is really interested in symbolic victories. The right has had no interest in symbolic victories and has been completely interested in like the really, really hard work of putting together like coalitions for power and profit. We have to do that. We have to get skin in the game, and we have to fight in a way that we haven't been fighting for a very long time. What do I think about groups like the Lincoln Project? I think that the Lincoln Project can go after Donald Trump all they want, but you need to understand that they do not own the Democratic Party and that they're not welcome in the Democratic Party. These are the people who created the ads who put in power all of these Republican people. They made tons of xenophobic, racist, misogynistic ads. If they want to go after Donald Trump, that's more than fine. But do not accept their tactics. The friend or the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I understand that idea. And they can go after Donald Trump all they want. But I have to tell you that they really love telling Democrats who they should nominate, who they should elect, who they should back. That's not their business. Their business is to go and take over the Republican Party and try and turn it into whatever it is they're telling people that they believe in. But we need to be very careful because over the next couple of years, we're going to watch a reconfiguration of the Democratic Party. The question is, will the Democratic Party move left in order to fight things like global climate change and economic inequality and burgeoning fascism? Or is it going to grow over like an umbrella? And is it going to start encompassing Republican people? Like right now, I understand, and again, I talk about this all the time. I don't know why William Crystal follows me on Twitter, but I can tell you that William Crystal is one of the main reasons that you don't have universal health care. He is not your friend just because he dislikes Donald Trump. We have to move beyond dichotomous thinking. It's like this Vladimir Putin thing. He said something to help Joe Biden. It doesn't mean he's your ally. So, whatever they want to do, Lincoln Project, do it. Go start a new Republican Party, but leave it alone. Yeah, David Frum, my God. Anybody who voted for the Iraq War is not necessarily your friend. Exactly. They didn't like their party being hijacked by Trump. They liked having their racism just at the dog whistle level. They didn't want somebody to come out here and do that. I'm sorry. It's just true. Zach, the treatment of 500 separated kids. How about that? They lost 500 kids. Just terrible. If they don't get justice here, should the U.S. allow an international court? The U.S. will never have an international court. They won't give up sovereignty. It's one of the big, giant black eyes is that we don't want to work within an international court system. We don't ever want to have a situation. But, yeah. Hey, Andy, at least you can admit you were wrong in the Iraq War. I cheers to that. If you can admit you're wrong, that's wonderful. It's all of the people who go back in time and say that they didn't support the Iraq War when they were the main cheerleaders. That's my problem. If you supported the Iraq War and suddenly you realize it was a problem, that, by all means, cheers. Absolutely. No Name says, I want to know why people who keep spouting, I want my freedom to do what I want, you can't tell me what to do, love authoritarians. So this is one of the main problems in America. Oh my God, David Frum will never admit he was wrong on anything. Oh my God. By the way, I would love if the Overton window would rebalance, but that's up to us. We got to move it. That's the problem. Is that the grassroots has to move the Overton window. We have to force the political parties and our media, and we have to do it through force of will and economic pressure. We have to move the Overton window. That's the big problem. That's the big problem. Um, so why do people who say I want to do what I want love authoritarians? Because their idea of freedom is completely skewed. They think that freedom is about their way being carried out. They think it's about opinion. They think it's about personal opinion. They think it's about personal reality. They think that other people winning elections or other people being treated well means that somehow or another that they're being persecuted. It's a perceived persecution, which, by the way, has completely motivated the right since there was a right. These people believe that freedom is all about doing whatever you want at any given time. And that's not what freedom is. That's not how this stuff works in a pluralistic open society. The problem is that they reject pluralism and open society. That's the problem. That's the issue. Oh, Erica, absolutely. They've altered the American flag at this point. At this point, it's like the thin blue line flag. You take that blue line out, and that is a fascist American flag. And I'm just telling you, that's where this thing is going. Yeah, they want freedom from consequences. That's a great way to put it. I think that's exactly right. What needs to be done to make the Democratic Party to become the conservative party? Not much. One of the things that's happened here is that they've completely agreed on market solutions. That and I want to say there's a question coming up in the questions here in a second, but that's one of the problems is the Democratic Party at the end of the 1980s, they they started embracing Reaganism and neoliberalism, which, by the way, just to get it on the record, neoliberalism is not liberalism. It's not left. It was actually founded by people like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. It just so happens that the Democratic Party embraced it because they believed their electoral circumstances required them to. That's what you saw in the 1990s with Bill Clinton, who made his election pitch that he was the rightful heir to Ronald Reagan. And he said that Reagan was right, and the Democratic Party believes in that. It just so happens that we'll be a little bit better and nicer than the Republican Party. Problem is that the Democratic Party needs to be moved to the left. And there's always a civil war within the Democratic Party and where it's going to go. And that's what it was. MSNBC is center left from a cosmopolitan corporate point of view. That's just the long and short of it. We don't actually have leftist media in this country. We have leftist people, we have leftist conversations, we have a couple of leftist publications, but in America, like and again, just as a just as proof of that, why are we having fights about where a person goes to the bathroom? Why are we having to have a fight? No, Democracy Now! Is absolutely leftist, but you're lucky if that actually shows up on like your cable thing. You know, you have like podcasts, you have YouTube shows. That's absolutely right. But we're having conversations that aren't anything having to do with like leftism. Leftism in this country has been defined by, do you agree that Black Lives Matter? That shouldn't be leftist. That should be the most center thing possible. The right shouldn't argue about that. The fact that they are fighting that tooth and nail says that there's a problem. Agreeing that Black Lives Matter doesn't make you a leftist. It makes you a person with empathy. At that point, you should have an argument. Yeah, science shouldn't be argued. And that's one of the biggest problems is we've gotten it completely backwards on what everything is. We think that, center right or center is left, and it's just not. The easy leaves. What are the implications of Trump's latest executive order? Should we expect to see a purge of civil servants if Trump loses? Probably. I mean, it's like one of those movies where you see where, someone's running down an alleyway and they're being chased and they just throw trash cans behind them. Oh my God. I assume that Trump will throw everybody. I mean, he'll just throw, whatever he can at Joe Biden. And I think that it's going to look a lot like John Adams losing to Thomas Jefferson. I think that John Adams set up a really bad situation for Jefferson. He was very pissed off about having lost to him. And so he set up a government that was completely against Jefferson. And Jefferson then overcompensated and, did a bunch of weird bullshit. But yeah, I think there will be a lot of stuff like that. Matt Parker, what's your take on the elderly age of so many American politicians? It's a good question. So let's we haven't talked about this on Bourbon Talk. One of the things that we're going through right now is the fact that the baby boomer generation is living longer, and on top of that controls much more of the resources and power for a much longer time. A big problem here is that they have kept hold of the power. I mean, we have two guys in their 70s right now running for president of the United States of America. You know, that's not great. That's not great. We need a passing of the torch. It just so happens that the boomer generation holds on to power as long as humanly possible. And that's what we're looking at right now. Is we're still living in a 20th century world in the 21st century. I mean, that's what's happened. And I don't know about you. I'm 39. I'm getting ready to turn 40 next year. Like, I graduated from graduate school in 2008 as the market imploded. Right? I'm watching the market get ready to implode right now. I'm laden with student debt. Like, those are the things that I had to do. And meanwhile, I have a bunch of boomers telling me, "Don't give me your sob story," yada yada yada. It's a bunch of bullshit. It's a bunch of bullshit. They have control over so much of the power and so much of the capital, and they won't hand it over. They won't go gracefully into the sunset and watch, as a generation renewal happens. That doesn't mean that they can't play roles, but there is a big, giant generational battle going on right now. A big, big battle in terms of generations. It's a big issue. It's a big issue. By the way, for the record, I don't know what's going on with McConnell. I don't at all. I have a doctor friend that I talked to today, and he said that he thinks he had a fall and that he was probably on blood thinners. I don't know. Oh, absolutely, Biden is a boomer candidate. He's older than Donald Trump. I completely agree. Jeff Goldblum's gays. It's not a bad name. Republicans are adept at trashing governing norms in order to wield political power. Should Democrats regain control of the Senate and or White House, what are effective actions counter these efforts while still maintaining the integrity of the government? On one hand, I think there is a real possibility that we should be talking about expanding the court. I'm sorry. I think it's a hardball tactic. I don't know what it would do. I think that there would be consequences of it, but man, I would probably add a couple, and I would think about it. I think that is a court rotation. That's an interesting idea, or term limits on that. That's an interesting thing. I would say this. The Democratic Party needs to start treating this as if it's reality. They need to stop treating the Republican Party like they're acting in good faith, because they're not. They need to start calling this a crisis. They need to start talking about this as if it is a fascistic movement for power and control. The fact that they don't call it that is because they're afraid that they're going to be called alarmist or hyperbolic or hysterical or whatever. I think that's what they need to do. I think that they need to actually treat this the way that it is. I think that they need to call this the crisis that it is. LD says, do polls stating likely voters include first-time voters like teens and those who are newly registered? I can't imagine at this point that you're getting a lot of teens and getting them on these these phone tallies. So I'll tell you the honest to God truth. I don't know that I trust any polls, but I will tell you that the lead that Biden has right now, both in public and internal polls, it's beyond the margin of error. So we are looking at a situation where Joe Biden is ready to win this election. The question is whether or not he will be allowed to win the election. That's the big question. Sebastian says, what is the specific controversy with fracking? Fracking is a really dangerous thing. And the fact that Biden and Harris are having to support it in public, particularly because of Pennsylvania, is problematic. it's a real issue, and it shows what happens when you have to be a national politician who panders to certain voting groups. It's like going to Iowa and talking about ethanol. But fracking is really bad. It creates earthquakes. It creates environmental pollution. I mean, you get you get gas in people's water that can be set on fire. It causes sicknesses. It's really bad, and the fact that they have been coming out for it is really bad. Yeah, it ruins groundwater. It's terrible. Fracking's awful. It needs to go away. August, do you think federal elections should be streamlined to run the same nationwide instead of each state doing their own thing? That's a frightening thing in this moment. Like, I understand why it is a question to ask. The problem is when you see Donald Trump in control of the government, it starts making you question what the federal government should be in charge of. I would be really scared to put voting in the hands of somebody like Donald Trump. So I don't know what the answer is. I think that there should be rules for voting. I think that there should be paper ballots. I think there should be a traceable, path to find what's happened with the ballots. Yeah, I think something needs to be done, but I don't know that it needs to be handed over to the feds. Christy, yeah, if only coal miners realize we can give them more and better jobs. That's the question, is they need to have the jobs before they give up the other jobs. And that's one of the things actually that the Democratic Party has failed on, particularly in the era of NAFTA. They talked about training people, getting them new jobs. Well, they didn't have the jobs there. And they also really underestimated, how people identified with their jobs, what the jobs did, and how it gave them meaning and purpose, and that was one of the big giant problems. Alana's Rocker says Putin appeared to reject Donald Trump's criticism of Hunter Biden. Some say it's currying favor. Seems like a facile assessment. Do you buy it? No, I don't buy it. I don't trust anything that Vladimir Putin does at all. Tuneback says, why do Republicans spend years scheming to get a SCOTUS supermajority and not just expand the court as soon as they could? A couple of things happened there. One, the Republican Party wanted to maintain the veneer of business as usual as long as possible. They needed the media and pundits and politicians not to sound the alarm and not to say this is a giant takeover. On top of that, for a long time, they had electoral viability. They don't anymore. At this point, they're doing this project as sort of a fail-safe, a backstop, right? If they're not going to win elections anymore, then they need to have a Supreme Court that will just turn down all progressive legislation. And so at this point, it was done in order to have that backstop in place. So if they could have done it, but they didn't want to do it in order to, sound the alarm and make it obvious that they were involved in nefarious anti-democratic actions. This whole thing was just sort of the trump card at the bottom of the pile that they were going to do if they absolutely had to do. Purple Sword, bring up fake Melania, please. There are definitely Melania stand-ins. Let's discuss, okay? I think that there are fake Melanias. I don't think that that's even an argument at this point. It's not even a conspiracy theory, and you got to understand that this is stuff that people do. Occasionally, that they'll have a stand-in who looks like somebody else. I mean, this is the type of stuff that happens in authoritarian governments. There's no other conspiracy theory. It's not Melania. Occasionally there will be someone who looks like Melania who will go out there, and maybe it's a security thing, but I think for the most part it's a PR thing. It's weird. That's what happens with people like Trump, is they just do this weird shit that just occasionally is just it's so bizarre and so weird and so off-putting. But yeah, it's not her. It's not. I don't know. Maybe she's sick. I don't know. But we've had quote unquote fake Melanias. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it happens. It happens in countries all over the world. This isn't just an American thing. It just so happens this is what authoritarians and people like him do. We're getting close on an hour. I have 3 questions left that I am going to get to, but I'm going to run this clock out because actually the next one, the next 3 are all really, really good. I want to get into all of them. Oh, it totally sounds like a Q thing. It sounds totally conspiratorial, but she's not. These are stand-ins. I don't know what to tell you. They're not her. That doesn't mean that it's like, it doesn't mean that she's dead or she's been replaced by a shapeshifter or JFK Jr. is secretly, pretending to be Melania or whatever. They just have people stand in for her. And I don't know why. I don't know where it came from, but we're going to take a drink and we're going to cheers to it. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cheers. Let's throw a little bit more Woodford Reserve. I would love to go on the Majority Report. I've been a big fan of Sam Cedar for a long time. I've been listening. Cliff Schechter, who I've enjoyed for the past couple of years, been on his podcast a few times, talked to for a while now. I'd love to go on the Majority Report. Thank you. I'm still writing books. I'm working on a new one right now. It's beating me up, but I'm really happy with that. And there is a new puppy. Betsy Pearl. Real fast before we go to the final 3 questions, I'm just going to show you a picture of this dog, that's in my life right now, because she is she's way too cute. Look at that dog. Look at that little dog. Oh, it's too much. I'd have her out right now, hanging out in the Bourbon talk, but she's a mad woman. Can't do it. Can't do it. She would probably bite through a wire and attack somebody virtually. She's a live wire, man. I don't know what to tell you. Whew. Yeah. There's another picture of her on Twitter. She's way too cute. Betsy Pearl. Good dog. All right, last 3 questions. We'll call tonight and go about our ways. Spooky Sam. Why do you think Dems are not prioritizing improving material conditions for struggling Americans? Not in the debate, not in TV interviews. They're laying us down. The problem is that the Democratic Party thinks that the only way to win elections is to agree with Republicans on free market principles, so they're not called socialist, so they're not called radicals, and then go through neoliberal ideas and then fundraise off of the really dangerous, moments that the Republicans, pull off. The problem is that even if they embrace, right-wing neoliberal economics, they're still going to get called socialist and radicals. I mean, we have Joe Biden and we have Kamala Harris. They're not leftists or progressives by any stretch of the imagination, and they're still being called leftist and socialist. That's what happens. That's what happens. The Democratic Party at this point is more of a cultural force. They're on the right side of the cultural issues, right? But they don't ever say what needs to be said, which is we have to stop arguing about a lot of these cultural issues because they're non-issues. They're political cudgels that have been chosen by right-wing strategists and think tanks. Again, we shouldn't be arguing about whether or not someone uses a bathroom or what their pronouns are or if Black Lives Matter. All of those things should just be done. There shouldn't even be any debate over it. It's a right-wing political cudgel that makes all that stuff happen. And the Democratic Party is more than happy to fundraise off of it. That's one of the worst parts about this Trump thing, is that they have made a ton of money off of this. And just to say it again, I want people to know this. Like, there's going to be a big, giant fight within the Democratic Party. And it doesn't matter if Biden wins. It doesn't matter if Biden loses. It's coming. And it always happens. It's a generational fight. And each generation is further left than the generation before it. And when they have this big giant fight, it either moves left or the challenge is staved off. I have to tell you that I don't think that the next generation is going to be staved off. So the question is, what happens after Biden is elected? What does that look like? That's the big giant question. And I have a question that I'm going to answer in a second that gets into that a little bit further. Alfonso, how do we deal with family members that have fallen victims to Trumpism? Are we missing something? No, you're not missing anything. Treat them like people. Treat them with love. Treat them with respect. Treat them like people. And then, if you can, talk to them about why they support this stuff. And one of the things that you're going to find is that they believe in Trump for different reasons than that they actually believe in him. They know that he's a liar. They know that he's not, completely on their side. A lot of them are going to vote for him or support him as a metaphor, or somehow or another it has something to do with who they are and how they feel about the world. Talk about how they feel about the world. And you can bring them over once they realize that you're not trying to come at them as like an opponent on the left and engage in some sort of trench warfare battle. If you talk with them as people, you can make some headway. And acknowledge that this isn't a left or right, yes or no type of thing. Treat them with kindness, treat them with love. And then hopefully you can get to the bottom of why they believe in Trump or why they support Trump, and hopefully bring him back. It can happen. Harvey, what does your gut tell you is going to happen in November and beyond? All right, last question of the night. Right now, I think Joe Biden will win this election. I think he'll win it pretty handedly. The question is whether or not, yeah, I've been able to help some people pass Trumpism, because once you start talking to them about their actual lives and what they actually believe, they'll tell you that yeah, it's not actually about Trump. He's just a total fraud. So I think Biden will win the election. I think the question that we have to answer is whether or not Donald Trump fights for this thing and throws American democracy underneath the bus in order to try and keep hold of power, and uses this big giant Republican machine to his advantage, or if he declares sour grapes, I don't want to be your president anyway, everybody can go to hell. The latter is better. The latter is better. I think there's even a possibility that Donald Trump gets beat in the election, and he just says, "No, I didn't see myself on TikTok. I did not. I would love to hear about that though." Okay. Um, I could see Donald Trump losing his reelection bid, getting into a sour grapes, everybody can go to hell, and then resigning at the end of November, early December. I could see that totally happening. So, like, let's say somehow or another Joe Biden is allowed to become president. I think we're going to see the right. I think it's going to become further radicalized. I think you're going to see a lot of these white supremacist terror cells engaging in a possible possible terrorism. I think that there is a possibility that we could see some domestic terrorism. The question is whether or not our media will be up to the talking about that. I would be shocked if they are. I agree. I think there is possibility of shootings, bombings, all of it. The Democratic Party is going to have a small civil war about where it goes and what happens going forward. I've said this on a few times. I think the best case scenario for Joe Biden is a Lyndon B. Johnson type situation where he goes in and he is, center right. And then, he listens to what people have to say, which, by the way, is actually one thing Joe Biden has done. He has listened to people, and he has been able to move around on the spectrum a little bit based on talking to people and listening to their stories. There's a possibility that he could be petitioned by the left and that he could listen to them. And I have to tell you, in the debate the other night, it was a big thing. He he brought out the idea of a universal option for healthcare completely out of nowhere. So there's a possibility that the country will move right and move left, and the Joe Biden will move left with it. I do not think that the Democratic Party is going to give up power or its position very quickly, particularly considering that they have a lot of moneyed interests that keep the Democratic Party where they are. The Republican Party has a big giant choice. Like 2012, they have the choice again about whether or not they're going to open up their umbrella and bring in people of different cultures and races. I don't see that happening. I think there's a real possibility that they are going to jump headfirst into QAnonism and embrace that, just like they did with the Tea Party, and that the next few years are going to be batshit crazy. I don't think this cruise ship comes in for a landing just yet. I think that fascism is going to grow and grow, and I think it's going to be 2024, and when the Republicans start choosing their candidate in 2024, before we understand exactly what we're dealing with on the right. I don't think the Republican Party is just going to close up their umbrella and say that's it for a beach day. I think that they're going to try this QAnon stuff on, fascism on, and I don't think that Trump is going to go away quietly. I think he'll probably be on TV for the most part. And yeah, Stuart Stevens. Yeah, he wrote me not too long ago and was saying that like everything I was saying about the Republican Party was true and that he was part of it, which was a weird message to get. I got to tell you. But no, I don't know. That's my guess right now, but we really can't even have a crystal ball at this moment. I mean, this is such a weird moment. And I will say, before we bring this thing in for a landing, it's going to be really stressful. I mean, the next week is going to last a month or two. Election night is going to be stressful. God knows that we could be in a lot of trouble on election night, and we are going to be. I want you to take care of yourselves. You know, log off every now and then and go for a walk and go do something and take care of yourselves, because we have a big, big fight coming one way or another. Either we're going to have to stave off a fascistic coup, or, knock on wood, we are going to have to start fighting the real fight of making things better and making change happen. Electing Biden's just the beginning, it's not the end. There's a fight that takes place after November and after January, whether Joe Biden wins this election or whether he's denied a peaceful transfer of power. We have a big, big, giant fight coming. You have to take care of yourselves, particularly during a pandemic. I mean, I'm exhausted, you're exhausted. You have to take care of yourselves, and you have to trust people. You have to build communities. You have to be kind to one another. You have to start curing atomized society. Well, I appreciate that, Wells, and I think you're awesome, and I really enjoyed talking to you on your podcast not too long ago. I appreciate y'all. I really, really do. I'm exhausted too, and I keep saying it. I think we're going to beat fascism. I really do. I think we're going to, because we have to. If we lose, we lose, but I don't think we're going to. I have hope. I am optimistic. I believe in you. I believe in this community. I think that we can make something better. I really, truly do. So there's that. Cheers to beating back fascism. All right. A couple of plugs before we get out of here. Nick Hauselman, back on the Muckrake podcast on Tuesday. I'm so damn excited. My partner's back. The Sundance to my Butch Cassidy. I don't know if I'm Butch Cassidy or if I'm Sundance. I'll take one or the other. Whatever. I'm just happy to have Nick back after vacation. I hope he's rested. I think he has been listening to right-wing media and propaganda for the past couple of days. So he might come in hot tomorrow. I don't know. Today, I recorded the new American Rule lecture. I messed the other one up. I had to re-record the thing, but I actually think it was better this time. That'll either be up tomorrow or Wednesday. Of course, we're going to do Bourbon Talk next Sunday. It'll be the Bourbon Talk right before the election. I have to tell you, it's going to be a big one. I need a new bottle of bourbon for that. Also, if you haven't already, I'm going to do a writing workshop November 30th with the Stables in Philadelphia. We're going to be learning how to write our stories in order to enact political change. I think we're nearing sold out, but there's a possibility that we might add a second date because it's apparently filling up, which is cool. Also, if you haven't already, pick up American Rule, and if so, let me know how it is. Let me know how it's treating you. I love hearing this stuff. It means a lot to me. Yes, it is going to be online. I'll be Zooming it, and I'll be doing it on my whiteboard that I do the American Rule lectures on, which I'm looking forward to doing. Again, y'all mean the world to me. I have to tell you, really, really, really appreciate you all. And I'm looking forward to doing this again next week. In the meantime, everybody, be safe, okay? Take care.